prospects and potential. As you are aware, today's roundtable is jointly organized by UNESCO and the Embassy of Finland. Finland's involvement in today's discussions is highly topical. As you may be aware, Finland is one of the leading countries in the world in the field of artificial intelligence. In alignment to our government's vision of making Finland a model country for ethical use of artificial intelligence, an artificial intelligence strategy was adopted in 2017. This made Finland to one of the first European Union countries to have a national strategy on ethical use of artificial intelligence. As one of the early promoters of ethical adoption of artificial intelligence, we are happy to join hands with UNESCO and to encourage the global communities to ethically develop and deploy artificial intelligence-based technology. Our societies have dramatically changed. This process began with the advent of the growth of digitalization and internet era, and now has transformed into the age of big data and artificial intelligence. Humanity has never witnessed such a huge transformation in the past. It is but true that application of artificial intelligence has opened up new and innovative avenues. To name a few examples, the educational system is undergoing a sea change with the introduction of artificial intelligence. Skill development has transformed and has become heavily dependent on the acquisition of digital skills. There has also been a huge change in information and communication technology with direct impacts on access to information, freedom of speech and expression. Improvement of artificial intelligence has brought about improvement in risk assessment, planning and knowledge sharing. So can we really say that artificial intelligence is humanity's new frontier and would give birth to a new form of human civilization? While we are overwhelmed by the pros of applications of artificial intelligence, are we aware about the repercussions that artificial intelligence might have on human society, especially on human rights, privacy, confidentiality, freedom of choice, and conscience? As the great Indian philosopher Swami Vivekananda says, we want that education by which character is formed, strength of mind is increased, and intellect is expanded, and by which one can stand on one's own feet. It is thus important that the knowledge and innovation of artificial intelligence strengthens humanity by conforming to ethical conduct and the fundamental rights of individuals. We need to ensure that artificial intelligence is not used for abetting discrimination, gender bias, and exclusion. In fact, it's a global issue which requires an inclusive global approach and active participation of governments, businesses, academia, society, and international organizations. India is home to diverse variety of people. Diversity in India exists in terms of language, culture, caste, wealth, religion, and region. With such variation in one country, adoption of ethical development or deployment of artificial intelligence will not be an easy task. We are happy that NITI Aayong has adopted principles for responsible artificial intelligence last year. Carefree adoption of artificial intelligence would expose India to the following risks: biases and prejudiced decisions against a segment of people, exclusion of people from services and benefits, privacy risk, security risk, impacts on jobs, and malicious psychological profiling. It is therefore of utmost importance that states are able to adopt artificial intelligence technology in an aligned, even, and coherent manner. As I now pass the floor on to our learned speakers for their insights on how artificial intelligence-based technology could be rolled out globally as well as in India in an aligned manner, I would like to take the pleasure of quoting the father of the Indian nation, Mahatma Gandhi. Keep your values positive because your values become your destiny. Thank you.
Amazing way to start and to finish, dear Tito. This is fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Embassy of Finland for this, hosting this fantastic event. And it's just an amazing place. And I'm sure that we will have a very interesting time together, around 1 hour. I really want to ask Mr. Sharp to join us here because he's the boss of the UN system. So please, please. I'm actually honored that you decided to come, Shampi. It's really great to have you because we have been seeing each other every day. But again, thank you to the Embassy of Finland, and not only thank you for hosting us today. I have to say that we come to present this fantastic framework, the first global standard on the ethics of artificial intelligence, a document that was negotiated for 2 years at UNESCO, produced by 24 experts of all walks of life, not only technologists or coders, also philosophers, historians, everybody that has to do with artificial intelligence. And Finland was also a champion of these negotiating proceedings, and therefore thank you again for this. And thank you to our panelists. I will be introducing you in a minute, but it's really great to be here. The fact is that what happens with artificial intelligence, it's everywhere. It's just everywhere. And we notice when we go to the internet and we have a recommender system that tells us what movie to watch or what book to buy or what university to choose. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. These are the capacity of computers to be trained and acquire some intelligence and make predictions, make analysis, make the recommendations, and more decisions taken by the private sector, by the public sector, are being made on the basis of recommendations done by artificial intelligence. And therefore the question that you rightly put at the table, how do we ensure that these technologies that are general purpose, meaning that they do not only are a sector in the economy by themselves, but they really impact everything. It's not the same an architect today than 20 years ago. It's not the same an engineer today than 20 years ago. And therefore, how do we ensure that they contribute to build more inclusive, more fair, more sustainable societies and one that aligns with the human rights frameworks that we have. How do we ensure that we are not just reproducing the inequalities? How do we ensure that we are not living outside these technologies a vast majority of diversity, cultural diversity, and because they are produced by just few countries and few industries. India is top on these issues, but the same, we cannot forget that half of the world population are not connected to these technologies. So what we did at UNESCO was to put what are the values, and the values are the human rights, are the inclusion, are the fairness, are the sustainability. What are the principles? Transparency, accountability, rule of law, privacy, you know them. These are the usual suspects, but we didn't stay there because these are like the very nice framework. Then we had to move to policy areas related to the data governance and how do we ensure that data is owned by those that are producing it. How do we ensure that if a person wants to delete their footprint in the internet, they can do it? How do we ensure the portability of data, the data trust, the managing of data, the quality of data, the representative data, because what you put in is what you get out. So this is super clear. And then we produce a very coherent monitoring and implementation step forward, which I feel is super interesting because now we are getting traction by many countries, and I want to thank the European Commission because you are helping us in implementing this in Africa. Japan is also supporting us. And thank India, because India has been top of the class in terms of being an emerging economy, super leading in these issues, but at the same time with the challenges that we all know. And actually, I want to quote here, and I don't know if I'm one of the world's largest markets for AI-related technologies, valued at over 7.8 billion USD. I'm sure I'm taking it right, dear Anna. India is really one of the most important markets. The National Strategy on Artificial Intelligence released by Niti Ajong in 2018 highlight the massive potential of AI to solve the complex challenges faced by India in many areas. But the need to really do it right. I would be looking forward to your comments on how you are advancing this in India. But at the end, what we want to have in UNESCO is a level playing field. It's not only one country, the other country. We have now this narrative completed, which is to say align the technologies to our human goals, to the SDGs, to the human rights. But let's just do it together. Not some that have some views and some others have some other views. There are path-breaking provisions here, like changing the way we govern data, banning massive surveillance, banning social scoring, banning the granting of legal personality to AI technologies, but also investing. How do we create a framework for investment to go for AI that solve our problems and do not produce more? So with this framework in hand, we are going to be producing an ethical impact assessment and a readiness assessment. And this is exactly what we would love to do with Niti Ajong, to get an assessment to see how much this is well covered in your current frameworks. But let me just move into introducing our wonderful panels and start the discussion going. First, delighted to introduce Anna Roy. She is Senior Advisor and Lead for Data Management and Analysis of Frontier Technologies in Niti Ajong. We all know Niti Ajong. What they say is what everybody listens to Niti Ajong. So I have the pleasure to work with you in many positions. You are leading on the responsible AI, and you have produced this flagship national strategy. And before working in the government, Madame Roy was a lecturer at the University. As I said, we also have Mr. Benoit Savoroche. He is the first counselor in the European Union, thank you, to India. He's in charge of cooperation between the EU and India in the area of communication networks, contents and technologies, and as such involved in the policy dialogue for India and the EU field related to digital transformation, includes, of course, the Artificial Intelligence Task Force, the development of collaboration on high-performance computer and the creation of a EU-India Digital Investment Forum. That would be super interesting to know a little bit more, dear Benoit. And I have to say that we have the usual suspects, because we always have the European Commission with us, but we always have Microsoft with us. I was in Latin America, I was in Europe, and it's always my dear usual suspects. And so we have Madame Aparna Gupta, Executive Director of Microsoft in India. She leads Microsoft customer success work and helping customers through their end-to-the-cloud journey and supporting businesses to maximize the value from their investment through Microsoft Cloud Platforms. Aparna has also led much of Microsoft work to promote responsible AI in India, and prior to Microsoft, she was VP Product Development of MD India and First Rain Incorporated. And the fact is that we were discussing with Microsoft in Paris, and we really wanted to hear about how you ensure transparency of the algorithms, because you are leading on that age, and I think that companies need to walk the talk, and you're really walking the talk on that area. And then we have Mr. Arindam Sarkar, who is the CEO of an MD of Mirasys India, technologist turned entrepreneur, who is on a mission to solve real-life challenges, including the safety of women, waste, traffic management through artificial intelligence-based solution. And this is the fact: how do we get more investment to these issues, to those applications that are really helping, even if they are not commercially the most attractive, but that we can have it. And under your leadership, Mirasys has successfully implemented an AI-based video analytics system to promote smart and safe cities. And finally, last but not least, Mr. Raj Shakhar, Responsible AI Lead at the National Association of Software and Services Companies, NASCOM, and Raj has been driving NASCOM's efforts at defining a roadmap for an extensive rollout and adoption of AI in India. You are the founder and executive director of AI Policy Exchange, a member of AI Connect program of the U.S. Department and State of Atlantic Council Geotech Center, and sits on the founding editorial board of the Springer Nature, AI, and Ethics Journal. So we could not have been better accompanied by this conversation. I'm really looking forward to learning from each one of you. And so let's just start by the real question. We all know what is at stake. We know what kind of tools we have. The European Union is also negotiating the new directives. We have the national strategies. Maybe we start with you, dear Anna, and you have 3 minutes from the perspective of this body that has the overall coordination for government. What are the levers that we have to move for the principles to really become real in a cohesive manner? Please.
Thank you very much. And before I start, I would like to, since Mr. Sharp is here, I would like to thank him and his wonderful colleague Radhika, who gave us the opportunity to be in this hallowed UN circle now. So hopefully our work will get, noticed, and we already are. I'm already working with UNESCO in different capacities. The way we have approached is when we started the national strategy. You spoke about the national strategy on AI. The government's reform agenda is inclusive growth, and in Hindi how it is called Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas. So that has to be translated in various fields, whether it is financial inclusion, whether it is any other part of inclusion. So inclusive growth was the cornerstone of the strategy which we released in 2018. And there we identified 5 sectors which were largely characterized by public goods. So we thought that the bottom line approach of seeking investment will not work there. That does not say that the other sectors like financial sector were any less important, but we thought the private sector would be interested in investing there, in developing new tools, etc. So in these 5 sectors, we again spoke about what needs to be done for ensuring that the technology is used for meeting the challenges and not just for, presenting papers and conferences, getting more IPs, etc. So that was not what we aimed for. So that's why the strategy was called AI for all. And there we had a strategy on data, we had a strategy on compute, and we referred to the ethical use of the technology. Though the strategy itself did not address the point, but later on through various collaborations and stakeholder consultation, we came out with the 7 principles through part 1. And in part 2, we basically kind of, referred to how these could be translated in actual practice. I would say both part 1 and part 2 are largely theoretical. And I will not go into the various recommendations were given in part 2. It's there on the website. I request everybody to go and look at it. But I would like to go to the part 3, which is under works, part 3 and subsequent papers, which are basically use case driven. And one of our, Amin is here, who's working with us. Actually, it's very opportune that he's here from Oxford and present with us. The first use case which we have identified is on facial recognition. We were working on a pilot project in a certain sector, and we thought that instead of just saying, this is how you do it in a generic way, which we did in part 2 of the paper, we thought if we take a live case, a live technology, facial recognition is something which has the biggest kind of concerns today. That paper is under the works, and there we will be showing how should the technology be dealt with, specifically from the point of view of public procurement. Because in our national strategy, one of the things which we really talked about was, the public as the market maker. So how do we leverage the huge capacity market that we have in India to promote R&D and product development in this space? Facial recognition already we are working on. In a month or so, possibly the first discussion paper will be out there. We will share it. Whatever we bring out, we first seek comments. So we will seek comments. The second one, which we are already discussing with some people and looking for partners, is XR, immersive technology. That also we feel has huge ethical issues. The third thing which I will quickly I hope I have some time. So the third thing which I will quickly mention is data sharing. There, iSpirit, which is the voluntary think tank of India, which is leading the technology debate, they already have developed the data sharing DAPA, which is called consent-based data sharing. And we are actively working with iSpirit, and recently in Viva Tech in France, we also entered into MOU with France, and also with EU we have done it, and in our task force also we are looking at that. So that is the third part which we are focusing on, data sharing, consent-based data sharing. So this is basically the lay of the land, how we are trying to do it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking care of the time. But I really feel that you are really covering those key areas on sensitive developments, which is what the EU is doing in the risk-based approach. We did not take a risk-based approach. We took a framework, institutional approach. But I think that the core of the issue is these developments that might be really sensitive. It would be great if all the public procurement would have the recommendation as a basis. That you will ask anybody that will be proposing any technology to say, do you comply with UNESCO? That's a dream, and that's why I want to bring Benoit to the conversation, because we've heard it, and I don't think that you will hear anything different really from what the issues that are worrying many of our member states. How do we ensure that is not only a national but an international cooperation issue? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you very much for the invitation to Finland as well, and discussing this essential issue. If you allow me to take a step back when we were talking about cooperation on this ethical governance, maybe we first need to ensure that there is a shared understanding of the need for such an ethical governance. we have this element in order to ensure this shared feeling of necessity is to advocate it. And there are several forums, so I'm happy to be here. But I would like also to praise that Indian initiative 2 years ago. It was called Responsible AI for Social Empowerment, which was an international forum where exactly these aspects were discussing at the nexus between the research, the policymakers, and the industry. Once we have that in place, then we need to show that there is a willingness, the willingness, I would say that will be sort of push elements about the defining of the strategy, the objectives, and then after, as it was mentioned, the strategy and policy objectives from the relevant states. But regarding the pool element, I think it's very important that it's not only governmental. Of course, the companies and the corporates have their say, but the citizens also should take their place. And here I would like to mention a very interesting initiative from Finland, actually. A Finnish university developed a massive online open course on artificial intelligence, which is called Element of AI, which is for the average citizens, for them to understand the basic elements and the ethical implication of AI. And that's absolutely instrumental also in playing a role in our democratic context. Once we have all that, then we can have this cooperation that you were taking, based on shared values and principles once they are identified, but when we know also what they are going to imply, and that we are not going to forget any aspect. And I'm thinking in particular on inclusivity. We're talking, cooperation with Africa, for instance, to be sure that we have the medium and least, developing countries involved, which have specific needs. And then after, where it's going to take place, we have bilateral forums. We have one with India. We have an artificial intelligence task force. It could be also developing coalition of the willings. We have the global partnership on AI, and of course the multilateral such as UN, UNESCO, but UNICEF, ITU, G20, OECD. Then will have their role to play once we have all these elements in place. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Quite an interesting construction, but count on us on that narrative, because I have to say that that was one of the most difficult agendas, because there is this willingness to be top of the class, leading edge in the competition, in the international technological drive, and then to say, no, let's go first ethical and then competitive is not the debate between regulation and innovation, which I think is a false dilemma. I really think that these kind of issues is quite important, and maybe this is time to bring Mr. Sakar to the conversation, because we would like to what you have heard in terms of the government, the European Commission. How do we incentivize and engage the private sector, and what role do you see for the private sector in implementing these actions for a stronger ethical AI governance? And if we can have, yes, you have it.
Hi. Yes, I'm out. Just before I reflect on, the question that you have asked, that, what kind of market incentives do exist at the moment that could incentivize favorable enterprise behavior, not just in India, but globally as well. I would just like to take a moment to reflect on the global state of enterprise adoption of responsible AI. And what we have at the moment is that public and private organizations have released over 160 plus principles and frameworks, and these actually advocate for values like transparency, explainability, equity, fairness. These are buzzwords at the moment. What we do not have at the moment are concrete guidelines for the operationalization of these principles. That is what the need of the hour is, right? Then we can obviously delve deeper into that what sort of incentives do we need based on the pricing structure of the investments that would be needed for enterprises to practically adopt responsible artificial intelligence. We don't yet have a valuation on what is going to be the cost of adoption of RAI. Once we have that, then we can obviously speak more about, what kind of incentives exist. Now, to reflect on the question, but I mean, there have been studies, like for instance, in 2020, the Economist Intelligence Unit, if I'm not wrong, they had published a report in which they had outlined that companies who were investing in responsible AI, they were projected to have an upper bid in competitive bidding. They will have an upper bid, like when they are competing with their counterparts in the markets, which are driven by strong responsible AI mandates, so to speak. The companies that are not investing in it, they stand to actually lose out because the costs of under compliance with existing rules and regulations that do exist, which are not that apparent to the layman, even to business experts, so to say. Like FICO, for instance, in 2021 had published a study in which they said that the adoption of RAI across enterprises is not consistent. Every enterprise have their own understanding of what they mean by RAI and what is their adopted routes for operationalizing RAI principles. And the understanding of AI ethics amongst CXOs, as well as the data and the analytics staff amongst these enterprises, it remained patchy. And this is very credible research organizations of the world who have actually stated that. BCG's report of the same year, they had carried out a survey across 6 global regions and 9 industries, and they reported that over 50% of enterprises globally were overestimating their responsible AI maturity. So I think we have a long way to go before we can actually ask the question if the right incentives exist for enterprises to operationalize the principles that we have today. Most of the principles that we have at the moment are vague, they are abstract, and oftentimes even self-conflicting. I'll stop there.
Well, it seems that you don't have a very good view of these principles, but everything starts with principles. No, I completely agree with you. I think that how do we operationalize them? But I would say that the recommendation took the view that this is a government role to provide a strong regulatory framework. And this is not to be, you don't ask industry if they want to be regulated in general in life. You just don't do that. What you do is you do it in a multi-stakeholder approach, and you do it in a way that you don't stifle innovation and you all these things. But I think that is the duty of care of governments to do a regulatory framework. They need to get it right, and they need to do it with the private sector. And maybe this is why I would like to bring. And by the way, we are going to have the ethical impact assessment tool. We would love to have a race to the top in the companies. Microsoft already said, I'm ready to test it. So that we can also encourage more companies to do it. But Microsoft, let me just turn to you, my dear Aparna, because you have been working with the government of India, and the fact is that we all talk about this mantra of multi-stakeholder, and we all talk about the debate, but sometimes objectives are conflicted, and you have been working with the government of India. How do we really operationalize this public-private kind of debate that will yield better in terms of outcomes?
So first, I just want to thank you for inviting me. So I think to answer your question, it starts with intent, I think. Are we all aligned on the intent and the common goal that we are pursuing? because I think, that itself is a good beginning. And that is really to say, how do we build safe and secure technology for our people? So whether it's an enterprise, whether it's a customer, end user, the entire humanity really. So if that alignment is there, then it's more about saying what is the principle we are going to follow in a public-private approach, and what are the guardrails that we will always be conscious about. And that's really the way we have tried to engage on the ground in India. And maybe I'll give you some examples, and I think some of it already came out earlier. So for example, the national policy on responsible AI that say Niti Aayog is working on, just bringing in some of our learnings as Microsoft globally on how we are thinking about responsible AI framework, what are some of the newer aspects that have emerged, because this is not going to be ever we have been there, done that kind of a way. It is going to be a journey. So kind of just engaging with Niti Aayog. The other example, engaging with the Ministry of IT in India on even identifying what are some of those AI-based solutions that the government can pursue. And then what are, again, the guardrails to build. The facial recognition example that I think Anna gave earlier, that's a big one. It's a huge one. So how can we work together on, creating that kind of framework that then every stakeholder in the mix can help define and follow, right? And then kind of supported by a strong governance. The third example that I'll bring in is skilling. Skilling, again, and I think he touched upon that a little bit, that skilling down to a citizen, right? And I thought that was so powerful. But today, as we speak, for example, we are partnering with the Indian School of Business on some of the content that we want to, land around responsible AI, with whether it's senior government officials all the way down to students, because they are going to be the future, developers and so on. Last, before I stop, as an example, is also the industry. We have to take everybody together, and I think that came already in the conversation. So whether it is AI for FSI, so what does it specifically mean for banking? So that's where we are partnered with IDBRT, which is the regulatory body on the ground. AI for healthcare, AI for agriculture. So we are trying to, engage wherever we see those opportunities, and it is a two-way street. Like, we are bringing in some learnings from, global learning as well as local learning, but we are also learning from the on-the-ground problems that are, being solved.
Well, this is fascinating. And it goes to what Benoit was saying, understanding, because you will be finding, of course, the skills are core to the work that UNESCO does. But the fact is that the skills that we need are of a higher level. It's not just the basic. Of course, we all need maths. All these are mathematical representation of issues. But the skilling, we really push to have the more ethical framework also for the skilling. But the question is to go really to the very concrete areas. And so bringing the NASCOM, Raj, how do we ensure, like, the private sector, of course, has its own role to play to develop responsible AI, but you also have, it's not like the private sector. You have big tech companies, and then you have all of the rest that are just taking it up, and then you have many that don't have even access to the data. Right. So how you create this sense of common purpose in the private sector to ensure that you develop these technologies with these ethical frameworks?
First of all, thank you so much for me being a part of this panel. So we as Mirasis India have been developing, we are on the practical side of developing and deploying AI and use cases across India as of now. We have deployed our solutions across 20 cities in India, plus we are doing it in the railways, plus the oil and gas, healthcare, a lot of industries we are deploying our solutions. Now coming back, I'm so sorry, am I audible? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So coming back, so what we realize, we have like 40 plus use cases we have developed and being deployed, and we have come across various stages of data collection. AI model starts that there is a problem statement. You start with data collection. From the data collection, you go ahead and you do the data set, and somebody announces the data, right? So if that somebody who announces the data has some bias or have some biased towards or doesn't have a transparency, that's where the problem comes. Because that annotated data becomes the basis of the model which somebody has created and which is getting done or deployed in multiple places. So as a private sector organization, what we decided that we will have a body, a product body or a product and we have diversified people in that. We do have somebody from Finland, a part of it. We have various people. We have included men and women in that product body and ensured that the data what is being collected and annotated are in the right form. Until the product body approves the annotation and training of the data, we don't go for production environments. That's the first part. That's a self-realization what we had on the transparency. Second, when you deploy the data, now there are a lot of government tenders we participate, right? So cities, and you have to get into cities, a government tender. The manpower, I think the point which was brought by Ms. Gupta as well, the skilling. How do you do that? None of the manpower are used to have, to understand how the data has to be used. The data is for the government, or there are certain data which are not to be dealt or not to be given out. So that's where the privacy and the transparency comes into play. We also, we have been partners with Microsoft as well as Intel, so we abide by their ethical policies and the entire framework is deployed on that fashion. Now coming back to the more major problem which was discussed, the facial recognition. So we developed, so women's safety is a concern globally. So we developed something to ensure the safety and security of women, but we have not used facial recognition. As a company, as a private sector, we have decided that we will not use facial recognition for sure. We did it through systems thinking, through gesture recognition. And we have deployed this in a city and which has a very good accuracy. So if we will, we can, that's what I believe. So there has to be a push, and I think the incentivized topic was a very decent topic. I think the government framework has to come in a way that there has to be incentivized that the players who are having this ethical AI in place or privacy by design in place, they should get a better rating than any other player who are not doing this. This is for the good of the community. So that will be my answer for this.
And that's very interesting because in another area where I am passionate about, which is gender equality, I really think that nothing helped more than Rockwell or this investment fund, the huge investment fund is Rockstar? Blackstone, you see. They are Rockstar for me, but it's Blackstone. When they decided they were not going to invest in companies that did not have at least 30% representation of women in their board.
Right.
Massive movement.
Shift. Yeah.
And we have been doing that for how many years now? Finland has been championing that for how many decades? Right. And then it takes the market to put these incentives. And I feel this is really important. How do we ensure that this is also market-driven in a way that it creates incentives but does not determine every single step and every single outcome? We have actually just 13 more minutes. I don't know if there is any question in the public that we can take up.
Yeah.
Sorry, just clarification. Did I understand you were saying instead of facial recognition, you were using system thinking and what was it? Just
so I'll clarify this.
Is that like in lieu of facial recognition,
right.
or if you could just
right. So what we did, I'll let you know the use cases over here. So there are a lot of problem. I mean, if a woman is, let's say what we have come up, and we will be, let's say if a woman is in distress, right? So we are talking about from a distress that is a stress when your brain is at freeze, right? It's for me, for anybody. It's not about women alone, it can be for men as well. So if we are in distress, our system thinking goes to freeze. Now how do you come out of the freeze, right? So we have created a gesture right now, which my system recognizes. Let's say if I'm in a situation which I'm not supposed to be, I can raise my hand, I can move it a couple of times, and this becomes the gesture which my camera recognizes and understand that I am in a situation which I am not supposed to be in. And the help, the police or whatever it is, goes inside there. this is how we have been improving our systems. We have said, obviously, most of the, now giving you an data, how,
I think we need to,
yeah.
I think you can carry the conversation because there's so many very interesting things. Given that we don't have questions, what I got from the panel, and you can see, is that there are no simple answers on how to move in these regulatory frameworks, private, public, risk-based framework. It's just very complex. There are trade-offs in terms of stifle innovation, regulation. There are trade-offs when you ask for transparency, but there's privacy. There are trade-offs when you have the property rights and the code, but then you produce harm. So how do we ensure, who decides what kind of worth or value we give to each one of these outcomes? The question of IPR again and development and the fact that we have so many countries out of the issue, and the question of enforcement, because one thing is to have this framework and another thing is to have capable institutions that are able to juggle with these issues. So I would like to just pass the mic for an additional 2 minutes. How do we deal with this difficult area and still continue being a major player in the definition of these technologies, and more importantly for me, how can UNESCO help? So over to you in the very same way we discussed at the beginning.
So first of all, we must recognize that we are talking about a technology which remains in a black box. So something which you can, which is not explainable, how do you regulate that? This is our firm view, at least in Niti Aayog, that in all the emerging technology sectors, we have coined this, and this is copyrighted, regulation with an innovation bias. So regulation with an innovation bias. So we use it extensively in our writings, where regulation, whether it is the crypto, whether it is blockchain, whether it is any other sector. And we see this trend in the private sector to come to the government and say, please regulate us, when we say we don't want to regulate you. So I think it is a tough choice. As we have said in our policy paper, what we have proposed is, a different criteria for, say, public sector, academia, the research center, and the private sector. And it is a light touch regulation, SRO kind of a system which we have proposed. And we have, like Microsoft, as Parna said, has been a partner in preparation of these works. So each company having, even educational institutes having their own ethical committee, so that you don't have something which is cast in stone and they take a call. That is the first thing which we have kind of, tried to do, and to grapple with the problem and have people who understand. Awareness is a very big issue. Today, anything is passed off as AI. What is AI? As distinct from, say, big data analytics. So all these are very, very fluid things. I don't think we have really sorted it out, but having a debate and having, publications like this really helps. When we did this facial recognition project, which is now being documented as a use case, I think use case based approach is the best thing. Because as my co-panelist said, these are very vague, they are often, there is a trade-off, this, that. So only when you try it out in an actual use case, you know what the problems is, and that is the approach that we are following, and would really look forward to in UNESCO to work with us, because we are starved for resources. I have a very, very, small team, and we generally outsource a lot of work so that we get experts to work on it. So would love to, collaborate with UNESCO there. Thank you.
Happy to help Anna there, and also to learn from you. Benoit, the trade-offs, regulation.
Well,
or to the EU.
Yes, I don't want maybe to focus on regulation, because that's the obvious way when we talk about EU, that EU is championing regulating and preventing at the cost of innovation. It's true that it's our approach, and I have to say that I've been here for several years in India. It's amazing also how we also, unwillingly or willingly, develop a benchmark. In particular, I'm talking about privacy. I've participated to several debates on artificial intelligence, and inevitably it goes into the privacy field and the need to have horizontal, modern privacy rules in order to develop trust. But I'm not here to advocate. I would like maybe to point a few issues on which we may even go beyond this regulation if we want to have a fair and equitable development of AI among nations. The first one, and you tried to give a definition of AI, which is not very easy and definitely difficult when we want to have it future-proof. For me, it would involve three elements, and we need to work on the three elements. The first one is the algorithm and the skills that are going to develop them. The second one is the data set and access to data. And the third one is the infrastructure and the equipment to process all this. And without being exhaustive on skills, I have to say that I've been quite, I would say, shocked. Yes, when I was discussing with Indian universities to hear, that first-year students in some universities in India earn more than their professors. They are recruited at very early stage by big multinationals, and therefore there is an issue of brain drain, and we have the same actually in Europe, and that has an impact. I don't have the solution, but it's something that needs to be addressed. On the data, we need to be able to find the data, and therefore there is an essential work to do on standardization. You see, I'm going further than regulation. And also to be sure that we have inclusivity and therefore to ensure that we have diversity of data. And that's why we were very excited when India reached us and they wanted to learn about our experience on interoperability of data sets on cancer biobanks. Because we do believe that if there is this interoperability, and specifically between different geographical origins, that's a major boost for research on AI and to work on these possible biases. Still working on regulation, I'm afraid that I have also to mention this aspect because I do believe that it's fundamental. We're working at the EU on this Data Regulation or Data Governance Act. There is a need to define who owns the data and how do we get a fair retribution to data. And I mentioned the technical activities of iSpirit, which is very interesting and which could definitely help in that. But this is absolutely essential to define that. But we're going further in the EU. We're defining also data altruism, where you can give, even if you can give for the greater good of the society, and also the concept of open data, governmental data that we share with India. And the last one, and sorry to be a bit long, is on the infrastructure, high-performance computing, but also communication network and data centers. And that's where you were mentioning the support that we're bringing to Africa, but also a lot to Asia with the global gateways and the connectivity partnerships, where we decided to fund massively infrastructure that are needed to have these operational systems. Thank you.
No, thanks to you, and really I wish we had much more time to go into the deep, because it's all these instruments, tools, frameworks, analysis. But over to you, Arindam. What is your take on all these trade-offs and how the business can deliver? First him, then her, and then you have the final word.
Right. Can I have the mic, please? You can have it.
Comes and goes. And you have 2 minutes, really, because I need to
Sure.
close the other event.
No worries. So I think I completely agree with my co-panelist, Ms. Anna Roy, that the innovation landscape is evolving at a breakneck pace, right? And I think every now and then we are actually witnessing public and private regulatory approaches emerging. and they are all well-intentioned in the right direction, and we encourage it. In fact, we have a responsible AI working group, and we have a panelist here, Ms. Aparna, who is on the working group, along with other industry partners from other leading technology and consulting companies as well. We are committed to building an enabling ecosystem in which enterprises understand what incentives are there for them to adopt responsible AI, what are the routes that they could adopt, what should be the prescriptions for them that not only emerge from the public sector, but those approaches can also emerge from the private sector. I know self-regulation historically has a bad reputation. Unfortunately so, we think that the right kind of self-regulation, which is informed with testing, rigorous testing, can go a long way in achieving the responsible AI mandates which are pushed forward by the likes of multilateral institutions like the UN and like other institutions like we also have the GPI now, right? And I think India is a member. So we are also working there closely. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'm quite optimistic. I know like at the outset I had painted out a pretty grim picture, but I think problem analysis is very important if we have to talk about any sort of regulation, public or private. I'll stop there.
I like the fact that he said public and private, because yes, these frameworks are not only public driven. So over to you, Aparna.
First up, yeah, 100% agree with what my panelists called out. Let me make it a little more real in context of how we approach it, because we develop products, we solve customer solutions, right? So the way I think we approach is that it is a baseline aspect, that every code that gets written and every application that gets developed has to have these guardrails around AI. So we have a body inside Microsoft who kind of oversees every development, has to get signed off on what data sets we want to use, how we want to use, and so on. So the way I say it is that just as accessibility, security, and aspects like that are inherent to how you develop software, AI also has to get that pervasive, that the developing responsible AI has to become a baseline. Because only when that happens will it not seem like, oh, am I getting stifled, you know, am I going slow on innovation? When it gets that integrated, then you will actually be able to develop applications at scale without it feeling like it's slowing me down. And that's really been the intent. And in a good way, I think what we are seeing is what that's leading to is a lot more human-centric designs, right? Because you are keeping human at the center, you're keeping their privacy at the center, and so on. So that is really the endeavor and the direction that we are going. Now, having said that, is it all all green? Obviously not. There are situations when some features are rolled back. There is actually an active recognition to say this is not okay. Let's take it back. Right? So it can be at a feature development level, but it can also be after it is live in the market. Right. And that's I think the key part, that it's the responsibility, whether it's a public solution or a private solution, for any of us to recognize it and say that this needs to go back. And I'll maybe quote two examples, one from 2 years back where we had a face recognition technology and we took a conscious call that for the US Police Department, we will not use that until there is a regulation around just human rights that is sorted in the United States. So it's something we are not doing actively. Another one very interestingly just happened 2 days back, so I thought I'll quote that. This was from our Chief Responsible AI Officer. Yes, we have a CXO defined for responsible AI. Her name is Natasha, and she also called out another product which is, we talked about facial technology a lot, but this was actually facial analysis. And we are not going to do a product, we are just going to roll that back also. And that had an additional nuance on top of facial technology, recognition technology, which was around gender, which was around age, and which was around your emotional assessment of the emotional aspect of a face. And we just recognized that it had a bias. It was potentially an invasion of a human's privacy. And so that's something we have actively announced just 2 days back. And we will have a plan on how to work with organizations who are already using it, and moving forward, we will just not use it. So, yeah, I hope, that lands the point that I think all of my panelists called out.
That's why Microsoft is leading in so many ways, and the next frontier for UNESCO for the ethics of science is neurotechnologies and neural rights and all these cognitive biases. So you have, Arindam, the last word. I'm sorry I was confusing, but I made a mess, but
okay.
is your last word.
So, yeah, I think the major discussion is again the liability or the ecosystem includes private and public. That's anyways there. Plus you need auditors, regulators, and there has to be a checks for everything what we are doing it. So there has to be an auditing body. Now coming back. So there is a saying, when we started the business, they said if there is a demand, there is a supply. So I think from the government perspective, there should not be any requirement of facial recognition. As a framework, that should stop. If that stops, there won't be any supply, right? If companies are making it, where we want to sell it, if there is no demand for it, right? So the framework should have this kind of, that because I still see there are requirements of facial recognition all around us. So that has to stop. So that framework has to be in place. Second, coming back, that obviously we as an organization having roots in Finland, and obviously we are delivering in the Indian scenario. There are like for when you deploy any software in the Indian market, there is something called a certain certification or a OWSP. Similar certifications or auditing has to be there for the AI, like we are talking about the AI tool. So that something has to come up, right? That's a framework which should say, okay, this all the AI which has been developed, or the use cases around AI which has Thank you so much.
Well, no, thank you so much. Thank you to Benoit, to Parna, to Anna, to Arindam, and to Raj. Thank you, Ambassador. I didn't mention that we have here our dear Ambassador from Canada. I was there with Simon Kennedy actually discussing this issue, which is great to have the support. What I would like just to conclude is that this is just the beginning of a very important exchange. I have to say that we have these definitions that I'm very proud of in UNESCO, and proud of the members that were the ones that gave the mandate and actually approved it by acclamation in the General Conference. But this is just the what to do. The how to do it has some glimpse, but you have proven how nuanced, how important it is to go case by case, look at what are the applications, look at what are the frameworks, look at how do we advance which goals, and who decides, and how we decide. All these issues are something that we really want to work with you. We are actually called by the members to organize a global forum on the ethics of AI, exactly to look at these issues. How we go for privacy by design, which is really important, but then do it. Right. Is very complex, and what do you sacrifice when you put privacy top, absolutely, and then you go for some other innovative technologies that maybe will be curtailed? I mean, there's so many questions, but here is just an invitation that we keep the conversation, that we work, of course, with India, which is why I'm here in your wonderful country, to work with our member states, but also with the multi-stakeholder approach. We lack the civil society. I think it's super important to have the NGOs. So this is just my invitation to keep on working together. We will keep you updated on the ethical impact assessment, on the readiness assessment, working with each one of you. And I just want to thank again the Embassy of Finland. It has been great, really, Tito, for hosting us. Thank Maya. Because I was just arriving and getting to know my teams, I thought she was part of your team, but it's my team. She's finished, but it's my team, which I'm very happy of. And Sharwa, thank you for everyone, if you want to stand, because He is our man in the delegation here, and Juan Pablo started all these things. So thank you so much. I need to run, but thank you. It was wonderful to have this debate today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.